Hello, 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 and welcome to the Vagabond Way podcast. The journey goes ever on with the long road. This episode, These Influencers Ain't on Instagram. Join Steve Bonham, Kev Moore, and me, Chris the Bish Lydon, as we discuss the musical influences over the years on the long road sound, from rock to acoustic music to jazz to visual art. Kev Moore takes us up north to a record store in Wakefield, and Steve Bonham introduces the freshest of the fresh, a first draft of a brand new song, and I bring news from the kitchen. The Vagabond Way podcast, featuring The Long Road, is exploring the world of the troubadour, the adventurer, the vagabond. The world isn't beige, it isn't processed, it's authentic, it's rich, and it's real. If those are the sorts of sentiments that make your brain light up, then hop on board. We are embracing all of those things, celebrating all of that, and we'd love it if you joined us on the journey. Greetings, I am Chris the Bish Lydon. Welcome to this week's show. Busy times here at Vagabond Way HQ. We're still pushing our single that we launched a few weeks ago, On a Bridge Across the River. Much thanks for everyone's continued support on that. Don't forget to check out the video on YouTube and check out the track on Spotify. But we're also gearing up for the launch of our next single. You know, that's next week now. Part of our sort of new methodology of smaller chunks of music, but more frequently. All of a sudden, 3 weeks have passed and we're on to the next single. Yeehaw! This next one is called If There's a God Out Here. It's a good one though. You'll enjoy it, I know it. We'll have a special episode next week dedicated to that single. Don't forget also the next episode of the Transatlantic Connection show is coming out in a few days too, on Tuesday the 29th of September 2020. Check it out on youtube.com/thevagabondway. This episode, Steve Bonham continues his chat with Graham Steele, and Steve reveals the conclusion to last week's nail-biting cliffhanger, plus chat and music from Elaine Davidson, a great singer-songwriter from the north of England. Please also do enjoy our curated Spotify playlists. Just search for Transatlantic Connection and you'll find them. Steve's got one, I've got one, and Kev Moore has one as well. So this week's chat between the long road focuses on our musical influences, from rock backgrounds to acoustic music to New Orleans, blues, jazz, and even soaks in some influences from visual art as well. So I'm going to hand over to me. Here we are again, the three of us from the long road. So we've got Kev Moore in Spain at home, we've got Steve Bonham at home in Derbyshire, and me, Chris the Bish Lydon. I'm at home in Manchester. So this week we thought we'd sort of delve into our musical brains a little bit and have a think about the artists, the bands, the music that's inspired us, the stuff that goes on. You know, we've got some new music coming out every few weeks right now. We had a new single out a couple of weeks ago. We've got another single out in another couple of weeks. And it's all building up to a new EP at the end of October called Out of the Darkness. And there's loads of different musical influences coming into all of these songs we're making now. So, Kev, maybe you tell us a little bit about what goes on in your head musically.
Yeah, well, how long have you got? Yeah, my influence, it's interesting to kind of address this because, as everybody probably knows by now, I come from more of a rock background, generally speaking, and my tastes as I've grown older have broadened. Not letting go of that, but encompassing other areas. And I suppose acoustic music-wise, some quite obscure artists have influenced me. That is to say, the artists that made me think, you know what, I like listening to this kind of stuff. One would be a band called Jets, who are basically like they were sort of like a 90s Simon and Garfunkel type thing.
Oh, right.
They were formed out of the ashes of a band called Jellyfish. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're an amazing musicians. Anybody who hasn't heard of them, who likes Beatles, Beach Boys and Queen and beautifully crafted songs, should check them out. Wow. They made two amazing albums. But two of the guys from them formed this outfit called Jets, and they very acoustic based, beautiful acoustic playing. And they really sort of turned me on to that kind of style. Plus, living out here in Andalusia, it was Steve really that sort of noticed that kind of guitar influence was creeping into my playing, and I just suddenly went, wow, yes, it is. But it's to be expected because I've got a gypsy family that live over the road, and the kids sat there flamencoing it 9 to the dozen most days, so it's gone in. You know, we absorb these things like a sponge, and that, of course, coupled with the Eagles are very responsible for for drawing rock fans into a country tinged acoustic vibe, in many ways. So there was that also. My old mate Robin Sarstead out here, he used to play a song called Cash on the Barrelhead by Gram Parsons. And that, I thought, wow, that's good. I'm not supposed to like this kind of stuff, but that's good.
Yeah.
And more recently, a guitarist called Jim Capilongo, who I discovered when I wandered into BPM Records in Derby some time ago. And they had a CD playing in the background, and didn't pay too much attention until this solo kicked in. And I'm like, stop everything. What's that?
Yeah.
And he was playing. It wasn't acoustic, but he was playing a Fender Telecaster, quite obviously, but very clean. But he was making it do things, inhuman things, And I just thought that is such incredible playing. So yeah, that's kind of that's what's come into my melting pot for that sort of thing. Steve?
So kind of listening to that and thinking, I love that. It's a very physical thing, playing acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
Particularly to play it like we do, which is heavy.
Yeah.
Trying to get that physical, rich thickness out of the sound, I always love that. And I think my kind of influence is in the, that I can see a golden thread or rather a discoloured, slightly rusty thread going back through time. Because I think I've always had this idea that I love swampy music, Chris, from down the decades. It's that brew of stuff that comes from people who've lived their lives, and it's not something you can learn, it's only something you can feel.
Yeah.
And so to me, that there's certain tracks sort of blew my mind. I remember Robbie Robertson's Somewhere Down the Crazy River, I think it was called.
Yeah, what a song.
Where he's just half speaking this bit about being in the backseat of a car with his girlfriend, rumbles out this line, if you like it now, you're going to love it later, and just that kind of stuff. And then
it's organic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And then people like what Dr. John was doing down in New Orleans, it's like another world. It feels like the world of musicians. It's the world of conjurers, and it's our world. And I like the kind of way those word spinners work, using kind of a surreal form of everyday language. I love that. Which then sort of says, some of the music that's informed me have been pictures, funnily enough. I love those old Dutch paintings of Bruegel paintings where everyone's out in the village square and people are flirting with each other and they're drunk and there's someone vomiting over the neighbour and as a hen got loose, and right in the middle there's something very, very dramatic happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the world going on around it, and I just love that idea of drama.
Yeah, I always see a painting like a frame of a film, a snapshot of something else that's happening, what's happening in the next frame, I always wonder that. And that's where a painting draws you in, isn't it? And with songs, you can take it that little bit further.
There's a painting, you might even remember this, when we were at school, Kev, there was a book a poetry book we used to have. Oh, God, I don't know what it was called, but we have volume 4 of it. And there was a W.H. Auden poem, life of me I can't remember, but it was about Icarus.
Right.
And on the next page to it, there was a picture by a Dutch artist of this guy ploughing a field, up and down, the birds are flying up in the sky, and then there's a sea, and there's just one leg sticking out the sea. And
yeah.
I love that painting. The big picture. The guy in mainframe is the ploughman, and he's not taking any notice of this drama going on just over his shoulder. So that's really, I think that's what we're trying to do on the album is, and we can take in all those great musicians. To me, it is the music of the southern states, I think. But actually, I like the narrative form of English ballads. To me, the way people like Townes Van Zandt and Dylan conjure up things with very, very precise language, that kind of almost shocks you in its way of talking. And in terms of the sound, it is a lot of that. My sound, I feel, is more, it's a bit eclectic, it's got bits of jazz floating around in my head, and not that I know what I'm doing, as you guys know. which is great because it never bothers me. But all of it has got that earthy feel. That to me that's what anything that feels like that. You know, I remember when Buena Vista Social Club.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
When that music first came out, these 70, 80-year-olds playing this. I just listened to it for days on end.
It doesn't get any more real than that.
Yeah. That was on repeat on my car for months, that was.
It blew my mind, you know, and I thought, and all the different intervals that they were using.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't interested in proper music. They were playing...
I think for me, I mean, that album in particular, it absolutely got me that there were these guys who knew inside out this form of music. And the impression I got from it was they didn't give a about the rules.
It's true.
And they were just making the music that they knew they had to make.
Yeah.
Yes.
And boy, did they know how to make it. It was inspiring.
Yeah, that's the word, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Just a brilliant sound.
I do think that grittiness, that earthiness we've got, I do think that is the common denominator with the music, you know, and that's we always try to achieve that, don't we?
And I think the grittiness and earthiness, and actually, as Steve says, the cinematic nature to what we're trying to do, and sometimes that's minuscule cinema. It's the revolutions of one little character in a little place doing a little thing, and it's just that little thing going around. Sometimes it's a city. We're trying to convey this the whole history of a city in 3 verses and 2 choruses kind of thing, and I love the cinematic nature of the music that we're doing.
It's a difficult art form, you know, to tell a story and tell it well within the confines of generally, not always the case with Steve, but generally 3.5 minutes. Is a skill, you know. It isn't easy to get across everything you want to say. And what I love about what we do, it's not just the lyrics that tell the story, it's the atmosphere that all our instrumentation creates as well.
Particularly this EP we've got coming up, sort of 6 weeks at this point, I think shows that to a huge extent, because we've got some very atmospheric music in this one, and stuff that actually I think only came about because we were in the studio, the 3 of us together, working with Stuart, the engineer at Woodworm, and we were thinking, let's try this, let's do this. The song will be out in a couple of weeks, If There's a God Out Here, I think is a fine example of atmosphere that there's so many layers to the story in that one. We've pushed ourselves. We've actually found a bit of an extreme here for us, I think, about how far we'd go with the song, and I think it's great. I can't wait for people to hear it, actually. If anyone says we're folk after that,
they can folk off.
Absolutely. This week on Songs in the Mix, you get a brief peek behind the curtain of the clearly tyrannical grip I have on my compadres in my thirst for content for the podcast. I seemingly squeezed Steve dry for a new song this week. Within minutes of gently reminding him I was due a new segment for the show from him, this missive had arrived. So I'm going to hand over to Steve.
Song in the Mix this week it's a strange song. In fact, it's called Strange Motel. You know, songs can sometimes hit you at very inconvenient times. I've been working hard this week, getting my act together for the book launch of a new book, How to Survive and Thrive in an Impossible World, which is out on Monday, good folks. If anybody wants to come and have a look at that, go to the website and have a look. Anyway, just to sort of break up the monotony of staring at a computer screen, which is something I find increasingly difficult to do for 12 hours a day. I picked up my Avenue 5, Fifth Avenue rather, that way around, Fifth Avenue archtop guitar, and just started plucking away. And I'd left a partial capo on, and these very strange chords just started to appear. And you know, before you know what you're doing, you're starting to play around. And after half an hour, I had this very odd chord progression, which I instinctively like, because I like to give Kev and Chris a surprise now and then when when they're just feeling a little too comfortable with the world. And so I thought that should confuse them. I should know better than that, because it will not confuse either of them. Anyway, there I was, and I thought, oh, that's good. I'll play with that later. And then Chris said, I need something for the podcast, and I thought, oh, heckers, I'll finish it. And so I started to write that yesterday evening, and I've just finished it now. And the subject of my song is motels. We have motels in the UK, but not many, whereas they are a deep and significant part of American culture over there. They're all the same. They all have a veranda on the outside that you walk round. Each room opens directly out onto the veranda. Inside will be 2 3-quarter-sized double beds, presumably 2 singles, a very shallow plastic bath, a coffee filter machine, and lots of very small bits of packaging which drive you mad. I've always liked motels, so I've stayed in them many, many times over the years. They're not extravagant places, they're practical, and the rooms always look worn but clean. I suppose that's the rule for them. They always have that strange air, I guess ever since Hitchcock, Psycho. Who could be in the next room or whatever, and there's no public space except for usually around reception. Anyone could be staying in any of the rooms. You just know from the trucks and the 4x4s and the old cars parked outside. It's the great common folk of America, with one of the common folk of Britain having to stay there. And then this song just grew out of imagining what sort of people could be staying in a motel at a time like this. And I imagined as over the years the various noises, sounds, raised conversations I'd heard, and just poured them into this song. It's really rough and it's really not ready, but I thought I'd give you an early listening. Will we use it? Who knows? Some old show, feels his life is on repeat. It's a great day every morning, out on Losing Street. In the room across the hall sleeps the lonely Madalena. All her hopes are in a hold on, a life like a weather vane. Out on the highway, a heart-warm carousel, we're all seeking refuge in this strange motel, and someone shouting out loud, the police are trying to frame me, just a face in an angry crowd. Someone come and save me. The jewels who were making love. He's never seen a girl so naked. Gives his thanks to the Lord above. This room was vacated. Out on the highway, a heart-worn carousel, we're all seeking refuge in this strange motel. June fills up her party dress, places slowly in a suitcase, starts to think it's for the best. She quits this hiding place as the castle starts to go. Someone gets the ice from on the landing. Ace of juice, it's hard to know. takes some understanding. Out on the highway, on a hard-won carousel, we're all seeking refuge in this strange motel. We're all seeking refuge in this strange motel.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Kev's Cafe Corner once more, where I bid you welcome into my virtual cafe, and we discuss over these weeks, at the moment anyway, record stores, their location and importance, in my life at least. Last week, perhaps you'll remember, we were in Shrewsbury, and this week we're going to travel north to Wakefield, a town where I lived for many years a long time ago. Now, back then in the early 80s, there were quite a few record shops around Wakefield, the most important one being EGS Records, I would think. And I used to shop there quite often. It was in the days when people bought a lot of vinyl, a lot of CDs, etc. But of course, it saddened me as these places disappeared and the need for them seemed to have disappeared. But many years later, I discovered that a guy called Alan had opened a new record shop in Wakefield called Wawa Records. This was a brave move, you know. People weren't really doing that kind of thing, and he was just getting in at the beginning of the resurgence of the interest in vinyl and buying albums in that way. And he's created a place now where people can go and browse and order records and buy and part exchange second-hand records. And it's just wonderful to see that brought back into the town. And I've bought quite a few things from Alan, and probably one of my most recent and my most treasured possessions is the double vinyl of XTC's Oranges and Lemons, which I'd been after for some time. I had it on CD, but I really wanted the vinyl. And now, thanks to Wawa Records, it's in my possession. Yeah, you might want to check it out if you get a chance. Oranges and Lemons is a double vinyl album, and really there's hardly a bad note on it. XTC for me are one of the greatest British pop bands, going from outright electric punk to beautifully creative pastoral music. I don't think there's been a band, perhaps other than the Beatles, that through their career have grown and become much more than the sum of their parts from day one to the day they hung up their guitars, which was a sad day. One of the greatest British bands for me, and there's something for everybody in their catalogue. So that's what Wawa Records gave to me, amongst other purchases, which are too numerous to go into. And I'm just really glad that Alan had the courage to open a shop like that in Wakefield and to create a meeting place for people, because that's how I see record shops. You know, music is something that binds us all, and therefore it follows to me that the place where you go to browse music, to listen to music, to choose and buy your music is a meeting place where you can exchange ideas and swap albums even, you know, buy and sell the collections that people bring in to exchange and trade. And I just find that a really lovely part of life, especially in these times when we can't see live music right now. The source of pleasure, it has to be the recorded versions. And next week I shall be visiting yet another shop, because I'm trying to highlight these places. If you're ever up in Yorkshire, you could do worse than visit Wawa Records in Wakefield. And when you see Alan, tell him Kev sent you. See you next week.
This week on the Bishop's Daily Bread, we're talking old and new. An old friend of mine, a bit of an obsession in the first few months of lockdown, I suppose, the perfect pizza dough. I'm still not there, but I found another recipe this week that pushed my, I'll give that a try button sufficiently hard to actually make me give that a try. This was a video on Facebook of an Italian chef making the dough. Now, he used a specific flour and talked about the flour's W rating, something I'd not come across before, to do with the protein level in the flour, I think. It looks like sort of strong bread flour over here is around 300 on this W scale. A little over, actually, what he was suggesting, I think, for this recipe. But that's all I had, so I thought I'd just run with it. Slightly different method to others as well, starting with dissolving the salt in the water and then mixing in about 10% of the flour and then adding the yeast. I mean, he used fresh yeast, but he did say you could substitute dried yeast. And then the rest of the flour and mixing as normal. He also said leave it to rest for 24 hours in an ambient temperature in a sealed container. My most recent successes with pizza dough have been with a chilled dough, so this was a bit different. And the resultant dough was actually excellent. Not quite as pliable as his. Not sure if that was the kneading more, or if the flour was the wrong sort, but it baked well and it tasted great. I think my forever enemy will be the temperature of the oven, though. Not sure I'll ever get a domestic oven to the temperature I really want for pizza. Nevertheless, a good pizza resurrection this week. So that is followed by one of my favourite ever bread products, crumpets, but a new venture for me. I don't think I've ever tried to make crumpets before. Can't remember what triggered it this week, but something happened and I ordered the requisite rings online and then found a recipe. Dead simple and actually very quick overall, just over an hour all told. And delicious homemade crumpets were my reward. I am so used to the shop-bought ones, though, which they've got a very specific texture, haven't they? It's not quite rubbery, but it's sort of on that wavelength. And I don't know about you, but I always have to turn my toaster to its maximum setting and probably put them in for 2 rounds on that setting to get them anywhere near the toasty that I like. Anyway, these homemade crumpets, they were much softer inside than the shop-bought ones, but actually I feel that was to their benefit. I'm always quietly amazed by the variety of things that you can make from water, or milk in this case, flour, salt and yeast. Oh, and in this instance a dash of bicarb as well. Endless varieties. So that's it for this week. Thanks for listening wherever in the world you are. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify. The next episode will be out next Friday. Join us on YouTube for the Transatlantic Connection Show and become part of the Transatlantic Connection movement. Head to youtube.com/thevagabondway. You can find us on Facebook, The Vagabond Way, or Steve Bonham on the Long Road. All of our music's on Spotify and Apple Music. Go and have a listen. Give us a follow. If you like what you hear, share it with a pal who you think might like it as well. We're on Patreon at patreon.com/thevagabondway. Big thank you to our Patreon and a special shout out to Orla Flynn, James Lydon, Yvette Lydon and Trish Taylor. Thank you for your continuing support. Patreon is a great platform that makes it super easy for anyone out there, to support content that you love on a monthly basis. It gives you direct access to the people creating the stuff you love, us, hopefully, and you get to play an integral part in shaping the direction of the things that we make. So become a Vagabonder. That's our name for our supporters on Patreon, to help us create music, live performances, books and short stories, this weekly podcast, our YouTube show, and some new things we're cooking up. As a Vagabonder, you can get the recordings and books we make for free, receive exclusive Patreon-only merchandise in the post, get regular behind-the-scenes updates from us, unlock access to exclusive live-stream performances and Q&As, and lots more. You can help us create something different, something that entertains and something that inspires others. So, join us on the journey and release the vagabond within. Patreon.com/thevagabondway. Thank you once again, brave adventurers, vagabonds and explorers, for joining us on The Vagabond Way. Remember, the world isn't beige, it's authentic, it's rich and it's real. Embrace every last bit of it. Until next time, the journey goes ever on with The Long Road. Bye for now.